A biscotti dissolves in the rain, but it hides more than crumbs. Welcome to Marble Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Where are you tuning in from today? Your comments make these mysteries come alive. Let's begin. If you've ever tried to get Nero Wolfe interested in a case before lunch, I'd advise you to save your breath. That morning, the rain was coming down in sheets big enough to hide a horse. It was the kind of weather that turns Manhattan sidewalks into gray rivers, the air into something you'd rather breathe through a straw. I was at my desk, going through a stack of bills Wolfe wouldn't approve paying until they were a week overdue, when the doorbell rang. Now, in our brownstone, the doorbell isn't just a sound, it's an omen. It means someone is about to disturb the sacred balance between Wolfe, his orchids, and the rest of the known universe. I opened the door to find a woman standing under a collapsing green umbrella. She was maybe in her late 30s, with eyes that looked like they had already argued with the rain and lost. In her left hand, she clutched a cardboard pastry box wrapped in string. The string was hanging on for dear life. The box had that damp, rain-spotted look that says it's been carried through a war. "Archie Goodwin?" she asked. "Present and occasionally accounted for. Come in before you melt." She stepped inside, bringing with her the scent of wet wool, panic, and something faintly almond. I hung her coat and offered the one chair in the hall that doesn't creak. She sat like someone who'd been told to remain still during a crime scene investigation. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe," she said. I gave her my patented, "Do you now?" smile. "That depends. Are you here to offer him food, money, or a problem?" "Two of the three," she said, tapping the pastry box. "It's biscotti, from my bakery, and She hesitated, then looked right at me. "I think someone's trying to ruin me." Now, I've seen people offer Wolfe bribes disguised as lunch, and I've seen them bring food because they thought it might soften him up. But biscotti, in the rain, with a side of sabotage, that was new. I told her to wait and headed for the plant rooms. Wolfe had already started his morning orchid session, which meant catching him was like interrupting a surgeon mid-incision. When I told him there was a woman downstairs with biscotti and a business problem, he didn't even look up from the Miltonias. "I do not consult on culinary mishaps, Archie," he said, "nor do I eat pastries handed to me by strangers." "She says someone's trying to ruin her," I added. "The biscotti might be the bait." That got him to lift an eyebrow. For Wolfe, that's the equivalent of a gasp. "Describe her." I did. 38, maybe 39. Brown hair pinned like she's auditioning for a vintage bakery calendar. Looks like she's been outdoors, against her will. Speaks directly, which I appreciate, and she smells like almonds. "Marzipan," he said absently, adjusting a mist nozzle. "Almond is an imprecise description." I waited. Wolfe's silences aren't gaps. They're tests. Finally, he said, "Bring her up." Back in the office, she sat where all the hopeful, desperate, and doomed have sat, facing Wolfe's desk. She introduced herself as Teresa Lupo, owner of Lupo's Bakery and Coffee. She'd run it for 12 years without trouble, until last month when things began going wrong. Orders arriving late, sugar swapped with salt in the storage bins, a regular customer claiming to have found a shard of glass in his eclair. And yesterday, the final straw, someone had left a tray of her biscotti on a park bench in the rain with a handwritten note. "Best served soggy." "Your rivals are many?" Wolfe asked, leaning back so far his chair creaked in warning. "A few," she admitted, "but they wouldn't be this theatrical." "Then you suspect someone close to you," Wolfe said. Her eyes flickered, just once. "I don't want to believe that." "You may have no choice." He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Archie, take down her particulars." That meant name, address, bakery details, list of employees, and, most interesting, her recent arguments. That list was short but rich. A head baker named Milo who thought he should be running the place. A delivery supplier she'd cut ties with over pricing. And a cousin she'd refused to lend money to. When she'd finished, Wolfe drummed his fingers on the desk. "I will consider it. Leave the Biscotti." That was it. No promises, no price quoted, no commitment. She left looking like she'd just put her fate in the hands of a man who might decide he preferred to take a nap instead. When the door closed, I asked, "You taking the case?" "Perhaps," he said, "if there is a case." "You don't think someone leaving your Biscotti in the rain is a case?" He gave me a look. "Archie, the destruction of food is a crime against civilization, but whether it is a crime requiring my intervention remains to be seen." I left the Biscotti on the corner of Wolfe's desk, where food goes to await either adoption or autopsy. Fritz came in, lifted the lid, and gave the contents the kind of look most men reserve for oil paintings. He took one, snapped it delicately, listened to the fracture, and sniffed. Wolfe watched this out of the corner of his eye with the distant approval of a monarch observing a loyal vassal. "There's orange zest," Fritz said, "and the almonds are toasted properly. Someone cared." "That will be our working hypothesis," Wolfe murmured. "Archie, call Ms. Lupo. Tell her I will decide whether to act by 3. I started for the phone, but it rang first. The bell at the brownstone has a personality. So does the telephone. The telephone's personality is needier. I picked up. "Mr. Goodwin." It was Teresa. Her voice had acquired a tremor I didn't remember from 20 minutes ago. "I'm sorry to call again so soon. Something's happened. I think he followed me after I left you." Wolfe's eyes opened fully. "Put it on the speaker," he said. I did, and the office filled with the thin, wet static of the city shoving its way across copper wire. "I went back to the bakery," she said. The morning rush was already lined up. On our front window, someone had taped a photocopy of a health inspection report, with a big red stamp across it, "Suspended." It's fake. We passed our inspection last quarter, but the customers saw it. Half of them left. "Who removed the posting?" Wolfe asked. "I did, and my head baker. And then my cousin came in and started yelling in front of everyone. He says I owe him money and I'm a fraud and it's karma. I told him to get out. He said if I talk to that fat detective, he'll bury me." Fritz's eyebrows made a discreet climb. Wolfe's gaze slid to the telephone with a kind of weary affection, as if it had finally learned a new trick. "Your cousin's name," he said. Luca Bianchi. He used to help with deliveries. I had to let him go." "Because?" "Because drivers who don't drive sober endanger customers and dough." Wolfe closed his eyes again, but that meant nothing. "And your head baker?" "Milo." The hesitation there had weight. "He's talented. He also thinks the business is as much his as mine." "And do you?" Wolfe asked. Silence hummed. "No." "Very well. Miss Lupo, you will not discuss me, my existence, or any action you imagine I might take with anyone. You will say only that you were advised to document incidents and consult an attorney. If anyone attempts to force a confrontation in your shop, you will withdraw into your office if necessary, and allow Mr. Goodwin to speak for you. That is, if I accept. Archie, I'm here. Go and observe. And bring back any fool who insists on intruding. I will not have the brownstone turned into a coffee house. But if they insist on becoming steam, we shall condense them here." I said I could be at Lupo's in 20 minutes and hung up. The rain had not improved its manners. On my way out, I checked the lock on the front door and glanced back at the office. Wolfe had turned the Biscotti box 90 degrees without touching it. Don't ask me how. I'm supposed to be the one who moves. Lupo's Bakery and Coffee sat on a block that was trying to be darling and succeeding on weekends. On a rain-smashed weekday, it was just a row of glass panes reflecting people whose umbrellas were losing arguments. Inside, the place was neat, bright, and smelled like civilization. A young barista with a crescent moon tattoo under her ear was explaining to an elderly gentleman why the inspection notice on his phone wasn't real. He wanted to believe her. He settled for being persuaded. Teresa stood behind the counter with both palms flat, as if bracing herself against an invisible swell. Next to her was a tall man with a baker's build, broad shoulders, forearms dusted with flour that looked as inevitable as freckles. His hair was tied back. He watched the room the way a hawk watches a field it owns. "That's Milo," she said when I reached her. "And this is Rosa," nodding at the barista. "Luca already left, but he said he'd be back with proof that I'm a liar." "Proof is a fluid," Milo said, giving me a once-over. His voice had the dry scrape of a man who wakes before the ovens. "Depends on the glass." "I prefer a tumbler," I said. "Archie Goodwin. I'm here to, well, that depends too." Milo looked past me at the door. "If you're here to scare Luca, he's not bright enough to know it." "I don't scare people," I said, which is a lie of omission. "I take their temperature. Where were you when the notice went up?" "In the kitchen, shaping loaves," he said. "I ran out when Rosa shouted." Rosa chimed in. "A guy in a hoodie taped it up and bolted. I went after him, but he cut down the alley. I wasn't chasing someone in the rain for a sheet of paper." "Smart choice. Did you see his face?" "Number." He moved like he'd practiced leaving. "I'll want the security footage," I said. Teresa's eyes flicked toward the back. "We have one camera at the register and one on the back door. The front camera died last week. The repair guy is coming tomorrow." "Of course he is," I said. "Who's the repair guy?" "Same company that services our espresso machine. Carbone service." "Supplier you cut ties with?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, that was Halbert Wholesale. Sugar, flour, nuts. I switched to a co-op because Halbert kept jacking prices and forgetting deliveries." Milo's mouth tightened. "They didn't forget. They punished." "Who at Halbert handled your account?" "Guy named Denton," Teresa said. "He insisted on being called Denny." A man in a damp blazer pushed in through the door with the insistent body language of someone who has come to deliver justice in person. He was late 30s, too much cologne doing battle with rain, and a grin that said he liked trouble for dessert. "Speaking of punishment," Teresa whispered, "that's Luca." He made a show of shaking himself like a dog and planted both hands on the counter. "Hey, cousin, I see business is booming. Should I congratulate the inspector?" "You should leave," Milo said. He didn't raise his voice. "Men who know heat don't have to." "Relax, flower boy," Luca said. Then to me, "Who are you, her lawyer?" "Her public relations department," I said. "We're running a special. If you shout baseless accusations in a place of business, we give you a voucher for silence." He pointed a finger at Teresa. "She owes me $4,000. I lent it when she was expanding. Now she's cutting me out, acting like I'm trash. I got friends who know things. That inspector notice? That's just the start." "Careful," I told him. "Threats photograph well." He smirked. "What are you going to do, take me in your pocket to the big man? Tell him I'm mean. He can't fit me in his office." He was wrong on the geometry, but I let it pass. Teresa had gone pale. Rosa was filming with her phone, which Luca noticed too late. "Great," he said. "Take my good side." "Luca," Teresa said quietly, "go home." "Home is where the debt is," he said, but the camera had punctured his appetite. He backed away, lifted his chin like he'd won, and left a slick of rain on the floor as he went. I watched the door swing shut and let the room breathe. "All right," I said. "Rosa, send me that video. Teresa, show me the fake notice." She handed over the damp photocopy. The font on the suspended stamp was wrong. It screamed more than the city ever had time to. The subhead had a typo, environmental. Whoever did it counted on panic to do the proofreading. Kitchen, I said to Milo. Let's take a walk. The back was orderly. Racks of biscotti dried like soldiers at inspection. A stainless table held a half-zested mound of oranges. Someone here understood mise en place, which earns my respect even if I can't spell it. I checked the back door. New lock, clean strike plate, no pry marks. The camera above it blinked a red dot that meant either recording or thinking about it. Tell me about last week, I said. Anything odd? Milo shrugged. A sack of sugar that wasn't sugar. Salt. We caught it before the mix. Rosa tasted it. I'm indispensable, Rosa called from the doorway. She had trailed us, phone still in hand. Who moved the sacks? Me, Milo said. And two of the new kids. I checked the labels. They were right. Someone switched the contents. Which suggests access before it got here, I said. Or after, by someone with time alone in the back. Milo's eyes didn't flicker, which was an answer of its own. The deliveries arrive at 5. I'm here at 4. Teresa comes at 6. The kids roll in at 7. And Luca shows up when he wants something, Teresa said, appearing at my elbow. He hasn't had a key in a year. Keys make copies, I said. Rosa, any other regular with too much time? Denton from Halberd used to loiter, she said. He'd schmooze Teresa, tell her about market volatility like he was reading a weather report only he believed in. He stopped coming when we switched. Do you still owe Halberd? Teresa pinched the bridge of her nose. One invoice. I've asked for an itemization. Twice. They send statements, not answers. Good. I like people who send the wrong thing at the right time. I turned to Milo. Where do you keep your recipe book? He snorted. In my head. Then the head is the safe. Guard it. He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth considered it. The door chimed again, and the rain sent in another delegate. This one wore a canvas jacket with a stitched logo. Carbona service. He carried a tool bag heavy enough to anchor a small boat and looked like he'd been born with it. Here to fix the front camera, he said. Ticket says it died. Rosa and I exchanged a look. I stepped forward. Goodwin, we're upgrading security protocols. I'll need your ID and the work order. He produced both without flinching. Name: Anthony Carbone. The photo matched. The order listed Lupo's front camera and a maintenance check on the espresso machine. It had today's date and a time window starting 30 minutes ago. Who scheduled? I asked. Dispatch, he said. Through our app. Probably your owner. Teresa shook her head. I called yesterday. They said they'd slot us in. I didn't get a time. Let's do the front first, I said, and walked him out to the window. He unpacked, climbed, and sighed at what he found. The connector's cleanly cut, he said. Not torn. Someone snipped this. Rosa cursed softly. Milo's jaw set. Can you fix it? Teresa asked. Sure. Give me half an hour. You get 10, I said. And while you're up there, did anyone from your company come last week? He shook his head. Not to my knowledge, but I can check logs. Do that, I said. He got to work. I took the fake inspection notice to a table, photographed it, and sent the image to my email for later. Then I called Wolfe. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he had expected me on the first. Report, he said. I gave it to him. Fake notice with a typo, a cousin who weaponizes vowels, a supplier with a soft-shoed rep, a cut camera feed, and a service tech who might be honest. The salt as sugar shuffle, the bakery's schedule. Wolfe grunted. For him, that's a 5-alarm. Return with the notice and the video. Tell Miss Lupo I will receive her at 4, and Mr. Milo, if he is so inclined. The cousin I will not invite. He has already announced himself. You're taking the case, I said. I am permitting reality to place itself in my orbit. He paused. And Archie, bring 2 of the biscotti. Fritz's opinion, while valuable, is not dispositive. You know that's going to melt your image, I said. Client brings pastry, detective eats it, case solved. Humbug, he said, and hung up. By the time I had copies of the camera logs and Rosa's video, Carbone pronounced the front eye reborn. He showed me the clean cut on the old line and left his card like a man who knows his work will be revisited in court or in conversation. 4 o'clock, I told Teresa. You and Milo. Bring any paperwork with teeth. Supplier contracts, delivery logs, the debt you don't owe Luca, and the invoice you do owe Halberd. She exhaled, a slow release of air she'd been saving for a better day. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said. We still have to explain why the Biscotti were left in the rain. Milo finally smiled, thin and brittle. Because some people only know how to ruin what they can't make. Maybe, I said. Or maybe someone needed a symbol. Soggy doesn't just mean ruined. It means touched, mishandled, exposed. Teresa glanced at the trays, at her neat kingdom, at the window where water streaked down like a curtain. We'll be there at 4. Back at the brownstone, I shook out the weather, handed Fritz 2 biscotti with the reverence due ritual objects, and put the fake notice on Wolfe's desk. He glanced at it, then at me. Tell me, he said, does the cousin bluster because he is indebted to his own mouth, or because he is in the employ of someone who pays him to be a fool? 50-50, I said. The camera feed was cut clean. Someone wanted the front blind, which means the posting was intended to be seen but not traced. Wolfe tapped the paper. The misspelling is useful. It signals haste, or an author who believes appearances are stronger than word. Denton, I suggested. He sells stories dressed as inevitabilities. Perhaps. Or Milo to manufacture crisis and ownership. Or Miss Lupo herself, though I am disinclined to believe it. The cousin is a cudgel. I prefer scalpels. Then we sharpen some, I said. He shut his eyes and inhaled, as if breathing in the problem's bouquet. At 4, he said, we shall be disturbed. He opened them again and they were clear. Good. It will remind the house that we are not a museum. I took that as permission to set chairs, adjust the distance of the client's seat from his desk by the inches that matter, and check the doorbell. The brownstone hummed, anticipating company. And if the rain kept up, it would wash the city clean or drown it. Either way, someone who liked soggy symbolism was going to be dry-mouthed in the chair across from Wolfe. By 4 o'clock, the rain had decided to take itself seriously. New York was rinsed, not improved. I set a towel by the hall tree for umbrellas and a second one for consciences, in case anyone brought a dripping one. Teresa arrived with Milo precisely at the stroke, which told me they'd argued outside about punctuality and chosen to be united in being right. I parked them in the office, client chair for her, the red leather wing for him, which he approached like it might accuse him of something. Wolfe didn't rise, naturally, but he did grant them the small nod he uses to suggest that existence is tolerable. Fritz delivered coffee for them, beer for me, and water for a wolf, which is what happens when the universe remembers its place. Teresa's hands circled the cup like she was warming a plan. Milo let his sit, untouched, because men who wake before ovens learn not to trust heat that isn't theirs. You wish to be received? Wolfe said, as if the doorbell had spoken and not me. Yes, Teresa managed, and then the words started to arrive in clumps. Mr. Wolfe, this has to stop. The fake inspection, the camera, the rumors, it's breaking us. My staff is scared. Customers are asking if we're safe. I can't bake trust. That is correct, Wolfe said. Trust is an acquired taste, not a recipe. Be explicit. The damage began 3 weeks ago, she said. First the deliveries, then the salt, then a customer claim about glass that we couldn't verify. Now this. And your cousin, Wolfe said, giving cousin the same tone he assigns to aphids, has chosen this moment to assert a debt. He's angry, Teresa said. He wanted a partnership and I told him no. He says he made the roots, like delivering bread is the same as owning it. You either owe him or you don't, Wolfe said. Anger is an adornment. I don't, she said, quick, and I believed it the way you believe in gravity when a plate breaks. Wolfe turned his head a precise inch toward Milo. You are the head baker. Yes. Milo's voice had gravel and glue in it, something that sticks after it scrapes. You consider the baking operation your province. I do. You consider Ms. Lupo's business decisions occasionally regrettable. I consider some of them fast, he said. She moves on instinct. I prefer proofing. Metaphor is not forbidden, Wolfe said dryly, but we mustn't devour it. He shifted, a mountain rebalancing a cloud. We will structure our understanding. The active antagonists, as you see them, are three. A cousin with grievance, a supplier with motive to punish a lost account, and an unknown hand that disables cameras and stages public shaming. They may converge, they may not. Mr. Goodwin will test each line. Meanwhile, you will not assist your adversary by speaking about us, about me, or about your fear. Fear propagates faster than lies. Milo finally picked up his cup. He didn't drink. What do you need from us? Records, Wolfe said. Everything that leaves a trail. Delivery slips for the past 2 months, purchase orders, emails with Halberd Wholesale, correspondence with the service company, employee schedules, and any internal messages about incidents. Also, a list of competitors within 5 blocks who would cheer your failure. Cheer, Teresa said, and then gave a short, humorless breath. Okay. I can list 4 who wouldn't send flowers. Send none for them, Wolfe said. We are not arranging wakes. I slid the fake inspection notice across his desk. He refused to touch it the way a careful man refuses a handshake when the other palm glistens. He read. The orthography is vulgar, he said, and the seal is a poor imitation. Archie? Already pinged the Department of Health's public liaison. I'll get a confirmation that no suspension exists and ask about recent complaints against Lupo's. Do so, he said, and call Halberd Wholesale. You will speak to this Denton. Persuade him to be candid about his disappointment. I'll soothe him with my voice, I said. Spare him, Wolfe said. You will also ask Mr. Carbone to transmit a service log for the past 30 days and to declare on the record that no technician visited last week. If one did, obtain their name. Deception thrives in gaps. He turned back to Teresa. And you will prepare yourself for expulsion. She stared. From what? From innocence, he said. You will hold in your mind the possibility that the harm was abetted by someone with keys, literal or otherwise. If you cannot, we will not proceed. Sentiment corrodes inference. It was not kind, and it was necessary. She absorbed it like someone who has burned herself enough to respect the pan. Understood. Good, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin will take you to the front hall for copies of your identification and signatures on our retainer agreement. The fee is my standard. If that repels you, say so now. She didn't ask the number. She looked at me. I gave her the figure and watched it do its work. It was significant enough to deter romance and cheap drama. Not so high you'd have to mortgage your grandmother. She nodded. We'll pay. We will work, Milo said, as if the two statements were not always cousins. Excellent, Wolfe said. Now, the Biscotti. Teresa blinked. Yes? You left some, he said. You did not intend them as tribute, I hope. They are a datum. Mr. Goodwin will bring 2. I retrieved the box. Wolfe chose one piece as a jeweler chooses a stone, snapped it, and listened to the sound with genuine attention. He smelled it, then brushed a fragment with a fingertip. Only after that did he let it rest on his tongue. The almonds are Spanish, he said. The zest is recent, the anise is restrained, praise God. And you toast twice, but correct for the rain by increasing the first bake. You do not hide your work with sugar. If your enemy is a baker, he will attack where you are proud. Milo's head tipped, the smallest bow a craftsman can give to another man's palate. He knows. He observes, Wolfe said. Now go. Deliver the records by 9 tomorrow. This house dislikes early visitors, so send them electronically or by Mr. Goodwin's hand. He will be out. In the hall, while I scanned their IDs and got ink where it needed to be, Teresa said, "Do you think this is Luca?" "I think Luca is an instrument," I said. "Someone else plays him." "And you'll find who?" "That's the offer," I said, and saw them to the door. Milo paused with his hand on the knob. "If Denton is involved," he said, "he'll talk to you like he's explaining gravity. He likes to make necessity feel like a favor." "I've danced with necessity," I said. "We step on each other." They left into the rain, taking their heat with them. I brought the retainer back to Wolfe. He signed without adding commentary, which is like a standing ovation in this house. "So?" I asked. "In the morning," he said. "He will trail the cousin and the supplier's rep. This evening you will mine Denton for malice and the department for facts. After that, you will pay a neighborly call." "On who?" "The nearest rival who would choose soggy as metaphor," he said. "Theatrical spite is a genre. Some cultivate it." I started with the Department of Health. The liaison was a woman named Kaminsky, with a voice that said she had explained the obvious so many times it had become an art. She confirmed there was no suspension on Lupo's, no pending enforcement, and yes, a handful of anonymous complaints in the last 10 days. Hair in pastry, unsanitary floor, employee coughing. All uncorroborated, all consistent in phrasing. She emailed me the timestamps and the complaint text. 3 came between 6:30 and 7 a.m., when Milo would be baking and Rosa would be setting the case. "Same author," I said. "Or a shared brain," she said, and hung up to go teach someone else the alphabet. I dialed Halbert wholesale and asked for Denton. I got him. He had the voice of a man who names his ties. "Denny Denton here." "Goodwin for Mrs. Lupo," I said. "We're reconciling accounts." He laughed in the tone men reserve for the word sweetheart. "She fired us, Mr. Goodwin. Reconcile is rich." "Then humor me." "She says you have an invoice she doesn't understand." "She understands all right," he said. "She enjoyed our credit terms until she didn't. Now she thinks a co-op can deliver almonds for less in a world where almonds grow on money." "Send me the itemization," I said. "Today. Also, have any of your drivers missed Lupo's?" "Not since she dropped us," he said, silky. "Before that, there were delays, because the port was a mess. Ask anyone who reads a paper. Anyone post a fake inspection notice on her window this morning?" He didn't miss a beat. "Is that a thing? Sounds illegal." "It is," I said. "So is poisoning a delivery." "Now I'm insulted," he said, "which is cheaper than being innocent. We sell food, not drama. But since you called me, I'll call you. Watch your girl's head, Baker. He wanted our premium almonds for special batches and didn't like being told the margin was too thin. Men who think they're artists forget the rent." He'd rehearsed that line, but the nouns had weight. "Send the itemization, Denny." "You'll have it in an hour," he said. "And Mr. Goodwin." "Yes?" "Tell Teresa to enjoy the co-op. They're great until they're not." I jotted that down under malice. Generalized. Then I rang Carbone service and asked for logs. Anthony answered like a man picking up on the first ring is his religion. He sent the service history for 30 days, within 5 minutes. No technician had been dispatched last week. Today's ticket had been created at 8:52 a.m., minutes after Rosa discovered the cut. "Which means someone snipped it in the early morning," I told Wolfe, "and counted on it not being noticed until business hours, or counted on it being noticed at precisely the moment customers arrived, he said. Humiliation requires audience, and the complaints to health line up with opening. Good. Compile them. Remove the adjectives. We will look at what remains. I put that together for him on a single sheet. Times, verbs, nouns. He scanned, hummed approval, and pushed it back with a finger. Now, he said, go visit a neighbor. The block boasted 2 competitors within spitting distance, which on a rainy day is a measurable unit. One was a minimalist storefront called Scoffs, where everything looked like it had been designed by an algorithm that thought sugar was gauche. The other was a cheerful joint called Biscotti Paolo, which, if it had a soul, wore an apron. I tried Paolo first. The proprietor was a round-shouldered man with forearms bigger than my calves, and the smile of someone who knows he makes the thing you didn't know you needed. He knew Teresa by first name and Milo by that kid who overbakes on purpose. He blinked when I mentioned the fake notice and swore in a language that sounded better suited to singing. Who'd do that? He said. It's ugly. We fight with flavor, not trash. See anything this morning? Just rain, he said. And a guy in a hoodie doing that text walk shuffle. People do when they want to look down and still move. Color? Dark, he said. He was a shadow with a body. I thanked him and crossed to Sophis. There, a woman with the posture of a metronome sold me a macaron that looked like a work of modern architecture and tasted like air that had read a book about raspberries. She gave me a slow blink when I asked about Lupo's. We don't comment on other brands, she said. We disrupt with product. May your disruption be dry, I said, and let the door shut on the smell of money pretending to be butter. Back at the brownstone, I reported. Wolfe listened, eyes shut, lips pursed the way he does when he's sampling a thought and hasn't decided whether to swallow. When I got to Denton's tip about the premium almonds and margins, he opened his eyes. Useful, he said. It may be true, it may be bait. Men like Denton hang meat and wait to see which animal comes. And the neighbor report. Expected. Paolo will not risk theater. The other is advertorial, irrelevance with a budget. So where does that leave us? With a structure, he said. Pressure from a supplier nursing grievance, noise from a cousin willing to be hired by his own appetite, and opportunity within the bakery for mischief by someone who wants validation more than salary. Milo, I said. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or a barista with loyalty for sale, or Miss Lupo herself, though I will not insult her by pretending to believe it longer than utility requires. He shifted again, and the chair sighed. Tomorrow, Saul. Tonight you will dine, then call Denton once more when he's at home and sentimental. Meanwhile, instruct Fritz to prepare fennel and orange salad. If I must entertain the idea of biscotti desecrated by weather, I will remind my palate that anise and citrus can, in the right hands, civilize a storm. I said I would and rose. The house had settled around us again, the way it does after visitors leave. The particular quiet of the brownstone reasserting itself, chairs exhaling, the rug remembering its weave. The case had begun to gather like steam on a window, there, then gone when you draw closer, and then there again, stubborn, shaping itself by the heat inside and the cold outside. Wolfe drank his water, and the rain kept thudding at the city, and somewhere a man who liked metaphors, soggy, was counting on them to blur the view. Dinner was Fritz's answer to weather, fennel and orange, sliced thin enough to let the knife talk, then broiled trout that made me forgive rivers for existing. Wolfe ate like a man paying tribute to civilization. He let me describe the afternoon twice, the second time in the order he wanted, which is how he thinks he isn't telling you what to think. By the time coffee appeared, he had the case arranged in his head like a place setting. Call Denton after 9, he said, which is when men who keep their shoulders squared all day let their voices sag. He will either preen or reminisce. Either will do. And the cousin? Saul in the morning, he said. Mr. Panzer's presence is the one gift we give idiocy. It never knows it's being watched. At 8:30, I put on a raincoat that had learned humility and took the cab over to Lupo's. Teresa had said she could have records boxed by closing, and I wanted to see what closing looked like under siege. The place wore exhaustion the way good shops do. Quiet counters, the smell of sugar and citrus that clung like a polite guest who knows when to leave. Rosa was counting cash with the concentration of a surgeon. Milo was doing the thing bakers do when the ovens are off, leaning on his own bones like they were a rack. Teresa had a banker's box taped and labeled. She put it down on a table like it contained a small, sleeping animal. Purchase orders, invoices, emails I printed, delivery logs, she said. My handwriting is terrible after 2 p.m. Don't judge. I don't judge before 10, I said, hoisting the box. Anything today besides the parade? Just a man who called to order a custom biscotti for his book club, Rosa said without looking up. When I asked what flavor, he said, soggy. I hung up. Milo rolled his eyes at the ceiling. If there's an afterlife for bad jokes, he deserves it. I walked the length of the counter, not because I needed to, but because moving makes thoughts settle. Something granular crunched under my shoe at the door. I crouched. There was a dusting on the threshold, white but not powdery. It clung in clumps where the rain hadn't rinsed. I pinched a bit, touched it to my tongue, and earned 3 disgusted sounds from my audience. Salt, I said. Coarse. Not yours. Milo frowned. We use fine for dough, coarse only for pretzels, which we don't make. Symbolists don't bake pretzels, I said, and borrowed a deli cup from behind the counter to spoon some in. Who closed up yesterday? Me, Rosa said. And Teresa. Milo left at 3 to nap before the evening bake. Doors locked, lights out. Front clean? She nodded and flicked a glance at Milo that said there were days when she would have preferred him to be a myth. He didn't blink. On my way out, 2 men under the awning were laughing the way men laugh when they're getting away with being young. One of them called the other Denny, and I turned, but it was just a coincidence. A different Denny, a different smugness, a different kind of rainproof. Back at the brownstone, I stashed the records in the guest room we pretend isn't storage, labeled the deli cup, and poured myself a reasonable rye with the courage of a man who can spell restraint. 9 came. I called Denton. He answered like he'd been expecting a different woman. Denny. Goodwin, I said. We spoke earlier. I'd hate to go to bed ignorant. That's a healthy fear, he said, and the ice clinked in his glass like it had been hired to. What's the bedtime story? You told me this afternoon Teresa's head baker wanted premium almonds for special batches. Expand on special. You ever notice how artists talk about materials like priests talk about relics? He said. He wanted Marcona, Spanish, the good ones, not California. Said your girl's customers could tell the difference blind. Maybe they can. He wanted me to run a side invoice, keep it off her books. You did. I said no, he said, with the air of a man who says yes to other things. Margins. And I don't burn accounts for bakers who can't count. So he got them somewhere else, I said. Or someone wanted us to think he did. You called me at 9 to accuse me of being clever, he said. I accept. Also, Teresa's co-op is short on inventory this week. I heard it at lunch. They had a pallet go missing from a shared warehouse in Red Hook. If you're thinking someone's playing games with supply, they are. It's a rotten season for trust. He had fed me 2 facts chopped fine. Milo's alleged taste, and a co-op hiccup you would know if you didn't sit where he sat. I thanked him with a noise that wasn't gratitude and hung up before his liquor convinced him to sing. I stepped into the hall just as the doorbell let out a single, almost polite ding. The time was 9:30, which is not the hour for strangers in our vestibule. I opened the door to no one. The street was bare in the way only rain makes it, a city pretending it never knew crowds. On the top step, under the lip of the stoop where the downpour couldn't reach, someone had left a small brown bakery bag. It had darkened in a way paper does when it remembers it once was a tree. I picked it up by the string and brought it inside. Wolfe met me in the office with his eyebrows arranged for questions. "Someone's courting you," I said, and set the bag on his desk. I loosened the string and rolled the top. The smell was almond, assertive without being sweet. Also anise, a little louder than Fritz would approve. Inside was a single piece of biscotti, the long kind, slashed diagonally twice as if it had been taught to pose. The top had once been glossed, the rain had bruised it, and underneath, folded into a strip, was a photocopy of the same fake inspection notice we'd seen at Lupo's, cut down to just the word "suspended" in screaming capitals. "Subtle," I said. Wolfe stared. He didn't touch. "You did not find a card with a florid hand, and an astonishing error in grammar." "No card," I said. "But I can go back and check the stoop for a calling card if you want to watch me swim." "Spare me," he said, and leaned forward enough to make the chair complain. He inhaled. "Not Miss Lupo's. The anise is clumsy, and the almonds are Californian, greasier. Someone baked this to resemble hers and failed where only a mouth would know." "Paolo?" I said. "He'd die first." "Sophist does not bake for taste," he said. "They bake for photographs. This is a hand that knows bakery, not branding." "Milo," I said. I didn't like the shape of it, but the shape was there. "Or someone who wants you to think Milo," Wolfe said. "Counterpoint." "The bag." He pointed with his eyes because his hands had other commitments. The bag was stamped with a logo Lupo's doesn't use, an old Italianate script that belonged to a place near Columbus Avenue, I remembered, for their espresso machine sounding like a boat with opinions. "Biscotteria Paolo," I said. "No, wrong typeface. Another one. Vaccaro's." "Bring me the bag," Wolfe said, and I did. He squinted at a faint grease shadow on the bottom where a stamp had bled. "Yes, Vaccaro. You will call them in the morning. We will not indict them. We will ask who purchased a dozen bags without biscotti today." "Someone thinking about props," I said, and went to fetch an evidence envelope. I sealed the photocopy in the bag, left the biscotti itself on a plate, and we stared at it like it might confess. "Salt on Lupo's threshold," I said. "Course. A deli cup of it is now part of our pantry." "Salt wards and preserves," Wolfe said, an idiot with a poetic streak. I despise poetic streaks. They waste flour. He sent me to the guest room to pry the box apart and check for a pattern in Teresa's paperwork that would make Denton's co-op rumor more than a rumor. I sat on the carpet and made piles like a 12-year-old with new trading cards. Patterns do what they want, arrive, hide, tap your shoulder. Delivery logs showed 2 early morning windows, a neat rhythm. The last 2 Tuesdays had 40-minute delays from Halbert's last week of service, explained as traffic density. The co-op's first 2 Tuesdays were on time. The third, yesterday, had come with a short count on almonds that the driver had initialed and promised to credit. The initial was an A with a tail. Carbone's tech today was Anthony. His A looked like a tent, not a tail. Red Hook Co-op, A-tail driver. I took a picture of the signature and texted it to Rosa with a one-word question. "Yours?" She replied 3 dots, then, "New driver. Name Andre. Talks a lot. Good tattoos." I brought the sheet to Wolfe. He glanced and grunted. "You and Mr. Panzer will observe the next delivery," he said. "Before dawn." "I thought the house disliked early visitors," I said. "It does," he said, "which is why you and Mr. Panzer will be the visitors. Meanwhile," he turned his head toward the biscotti on the plate and finally used a finger to snap it, "we will consider this trespass. Our adversary has announced they know our address. That is impertinent, but hardly arcane. They have announced they can imitate, which is useful even in failure, and they have announced they prefer theatre to utility. Such men always have an audience in mind. Who's the audience? I asked. Miss Lupo, he said, and her baker, and us. They want us to look where they point, which means we look where they don't, I said. Rosa? Possibly, he said. Or the cousins' friends who know things. Or the co-op, where pallets vanish the way honor does in consortiums. Do not romanticize thieves. They are merchants of short time. The phone on Wolfe's desk made a small sound, the one it makes when Fritz has decided the house needs 8 o'clock tomorrow to be different from 9. He came in with a tray and, without comment, set down 2 small dishes, one containing the soggy biscotti, one the dry lupo piece from the afternoon, each broken cleanly in half. He had also put out a ramekin with 3 grains of the coarse salt from my cup. Wolfe touched the soggy half to the salt with the precision of a priest anointing. He tasted. He said nothing for a long time, which is Wolfe's way of making you remember you prefer silence to nonsense. Cardamom, he said at last. I blinked. Where? Barely. It is not in Miss Lupo's mix. It is here. Whoever baked this has a hand that drifts to it. Habit. If we find a baker who loves cardamom the way Milo loves dryness and Teresa loves restraint, we have our mimic. That narrows a city when you have a palate like yours, I said, to 100,000. Fewer, he said. Cardamom is fashionable among the insincere, but the rest, this is someone who learned honestly and performs artifice poorly. An apprentice, perhaps, or a journeyman with an ego and a grievance. Luca, I said. He can't bake. Not the cousin, Wolfe said, with a contempt that would have curdled milk. He does not love anything enough to overuse it. He merely wants. It was 10:30. The rain had softened from lecture to lullaby. I called Saul and told him tomorrow would start at 5. He used a word that implied affection and went back to whatever night men like him do to keep edges sharp. I wrote out a list for the morning, Vaccaro's about the bags, the co-op about drivers, a second call to Denton to see if sobriety changed his melody, and a visit to Lupo's before the sun remembered its job. I stood at the office window for a minute more and watched the city blink. New York forgives nothing and forgets everything. Behind me, Wolfe let out a sound that might have been a yawn or a verdict. We have been trespassed upon, he said. Good. It clarifies. Men who enter my house uninvited will regret it, even if they send pastry first. And if they're watching to see if we panic, then let them see stillness, he said. Tomorrow, movement. I turned out the light. The brownstone settled, the way old ships settle on the tide, creeks you trust, shadows you know by name. In the hall I could smell a faint trace of anise, like a thought that didn't want to be caught. I looked at the plate with its 2 halves, and if I'd known which was justice, I would have eaten it. Instead, I went to bed and set the alarm. For a time of day I generally prefer to meet from the other side, and the rain kept teaching the city about water, and somewhere a baker who liked cardamom was dreaming up a better insult. The alarm went off at 4:30, a time of day I usually treat as a rumor. The brownstone was still dark except for the hall light Fritz leaves on for returning soldiers, and Wolfe was in no danger of stirring. He would be dreaming of eggs in aspic or the complete extinction of the human race, whichever soothed him more. I dressed for weather and anonymity, which meant a dark coat, a cap low, enough to keep the rain from making decisions for my hair, and shoes that could take the kind of morning sidewalks New York hands you. Saul was already parked a half-block from Lupo's when I got there, leaning against his sedan like the street had been his since the Dutch traded it for beads. The rain had stopped in the night, but left the pavement damp enough to remember. The bakery's front was dark except for the low glow from the kitchen in back. Through the window, I could see Milo moving like a man whose muscles had memorized their orders years ago. Teresa wasn't in sight. "You expecting a parade?" Saul asked, eyes on the street. "Just one float," I said. "A co-op truck with a driver named Andre who signs like he's drawing a snake. And you think he's part of the trouble?" "I think he's delivering more than almonds," I said. We didn't wait long. At 5:17, a white truck with the co-op logo pulled to the curb, its brakes complaining like an old man in a low chair. The driver's door opened, and a tall, lean guy stepped out. Early 30s, dark knit cap, a beard that was more ambition than result. His forearms showed from under rolled sleeves despite the chill, the skin marked with ink that climbed like ivy. Geometric patterns, a koi fish, and what looked like a cluster of cardamom pods near his wrist. My morning woke up faster than the coffee I hadn't had yet. He pulled open the truck's side door and swung out 2 sacks of flour, hefting them like a man who wanted you to notice he could. Milo came out with a clipboard and a look that was either guarded or bored. Sometimes they're the same. "Morning," Andre said, and grinned like the word was an inside joke. "You're short 2 cases of almonds," Milo said. Andre shrugged. "Warehouse is still waiting on the shipment. They said they'll make it up next week." "Like last week," Milo said flatly. Andre spread his hands. "Hey, I just deliver. I don't plant the trees." Saul's eyes met mine. I stayed back, watching the way Andre moved, comfortable, like he belonged in other people's spaces. He signed the delivery slip with his tail a flourish, handed Milo the pen, and on his way back to the truck, glanced down the block like he was checking if someone was watching. If he knew, he didn't show it. When the truck pulled away, I stepped inside Lupo's. Milo was cutting open a flour sack, the sound sharp in the quiet. "That's your regular driver now?" I asked. "He's been here 3 weeks," Milo said. "First week we got everything we ordered. After that," he spread his hands. "Friendly?" "Too friendly," he said. "Wants to talk about baking. Says he used to do it for a while. Then he asks how we guard our recipes like it's a casual question." "And cardamom?" I asked. Milo's head came up. "Yeah, he said it's underused. I told him it's overused when it's not wanted." Didn't have to work for my next thought. I asked if Andre ever came in as a customer. Milo said twice. Once to get coffee, once to bring a sample Biscotti he'd made at home, which Milo had binned without tasting because he doesn't eat strangers' food. I asked if Teresa had tried it. Milo didn't know. Teresa came out from the back just then, hair pulled into the kind of knot you do when the day starts earlier than your patience. I told her about the cardamom in our soggy gift from last night and about Andre's wrist tattoo. Her mouth pressed into a line you could cut Biscotti with. "He said he baked for a place in Queens," she said, "but he never said where." "Vaccaro's?" I asked. She frowned. "Maybe. He knew about their hazelnut batch. Said it was overrated." I told her I'd be visiting Vaccaro's after I was done here, and to keep Andre talking if he dropped by without a truck. Saul and I followed the co-op van for 3 more stops. The route was tight, mostly small groceries and a cafe. At each, Andre did his smile and heft routine, quick in and out. At the third, a narrow storefront that smelled like cinnamon, he stayed inside longer than needed. When he came out, he had an empty Biscotti tin under his arm. Saul's eyebrow lifted. "Souvenir," he said. We let him finish his route and head back toward the warehouse. I didn't want to spook him yet. He was still filling the basket. Saul peeled off to start on Luca, and I headed for Vaccaro's. Vaccaro's bakery had the same smell it had 20 years ago, coffee strong enough to stand on, sugar that didn't apologize for itself, and ovens that had probably been seasoned by a century of flour in the air. Behind the counter was a man in his late 50s with arms that said he'd never learned to avoid lifting things himself. I asked if he sold his bags in bulk. He said sure, to caterers and to a few former employees who liked to gift their own baking in something that looked respectable. When I asked if one of those was named Andre, he gave me a look like I'd asked if his biscotti came from a box. "Yeah," he said. "Kid worked here 2 years. Good hands but restless. Thought he knew more than the ovens. Left after a fight about cardamom." "What kind of fight?" "He put it in the almond batch," Vaccaro said. "I told him it was like putting onions in ice cream. Wrong place, wrong time. He said customers loved it. I said customers lied. He quit the next day." That was enough to hang a name on a flavor. I thanked him, bought a small bag of biscotti so my face wouldn't be remembered as empty-handed, and left. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the plant rooms, which meant I had 10 minutes to get coffee and sort my notes. When he came in, he took his chair like a man claiming territory and listened while I laid it out. Andre's delivery pattern, the almond shortages, the friendly questions about recipes, the tattoo, the history with Vaccaro's, the cardamom fight. "He bakes, he resents, he mimics," Wolfe said. "And he has access to both product and packaging. His motive?" "Could be for himself," I said, "or for someone who wants to hurt Teresa. Luca, Denton, another rival." "Not Denton," Wolfe said. "Denton prefers to spoil by rot, not spectacle. The cousin is capable of being a go-between, but Andre is the hand. His grievance is personal, his method is borrowed." "And the audience?" "Still Teresa and Milo," Wolfe said. "To unsettle their alliance, to make them suspect each other. A rival baker would aim at customers. This performance aims inside the kitchen." It fit. Andre's timing, the salted threshold, the fake inspection, all things that made the shop look clumsy or careless from within. If Milo suspected Teresa, or Teresa suspected Milo, the damage doubled. "What's next?" I asked. "We verify his connection to Luca," Wolfe said. "Or to another who profits. Mr. Panzer will assist. You will invite Andre to bring me his biscotti." I looked at him. "You think he'll just stroll in here with pastries?" "He wants to be seen," Wolfe said, "and tasted. That is the impulse of the vein. You will tell him we are considering opening a bakery in the brownstone and seek a consultant." "That's insane enough to be true," I said. "Exactly," Wolfe said and closed his eyes. "Now let me think about cardamom without speaking." The idea of telling a man like Andre that Wolfe was opening a bakery in the brownstone felt like announcing the Pope was starting a nightclub, but I've sold stranger things when the buyer's ego wanted it badly enough. The trick would be getting him curious without giving him time to get clever. Wolfe's instructions were simple. Make him feel chosen, make him bring the bait himself. I waited until early afternoon when the co-op's truck was likely idle and Andre's day had moved from labor to lounging. His number wasn't hard to get. Rosa had it in her phone from a delivery reschedule. I called, using the voice I keep for, "This is going to be good for you if you don't think about it too hard." "Is this Andre?" I said. "Yeah." "Who's this?" "Archie Goodwin. You've been making deliveries to Lupo's." A pause. "Sure. Everything okay?" "Better than okay. I'm calling on behalf of Nero Wolfe. He's considering a project and your name came up." "My name?" There it was, the mix of suspicion and hope, like someone hearing their inner will but not sure if it's for cash or the cat. "Wolfe's thinking about a specialty bakery operation," I said, keeping my tone flat enough to pass for business and warm enough to pass for flattery. "We're speaking to a few people with a reputation for creativity. You were recommended as someone who understands flavor in a way most don't." The pause was shorter this time. "Yeah, I know my way around a batch." "Then you know cardamom can work if you respect it." He laughed, the kind of short, self-pleased sound that confirmed Wolfe's hunch. "That's right. Most people don't get that. Wolfe does. He's curious about your biscotti. We thought you might bring some by the brownstone. Say tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. You want me to bake for you?" We want to see what you'd do if you could showcase your style without a menu to answer to. I let that hang. We'll cover your costs. That's fine, he said quickly. I've got some ideas I've been sitting on. I bet you have. Bring a dozen, assorted if you like. Wolfe likes range. He gave me a low chuckle, the kind that comes from picturing himself walking into a room where no one expects him to be important. We set the time. When I hung up, I had the odd sensation you get when you bait a hook and feel the tug before it even hits water. Wolfe listened to the report with his eyes closed, fingers tented. He will overreach, he said. That is the vice of the aggrieved artisan. He will want to impress, and in doing so, he will expose the habits that betray him. Do you want anyone else present? I asked. Only you. Mr. Panzer will be occupied with the cousin. I prefer to keep the room uncluttered when vanity enters. The rest of the afternoon was spent combing through Teresa's records for anything that tied her more tightly to Luca or Andre. It was a lot of small paper noises and coffee. By 5, Sol called in. He'd tailed Luca through a slow-motion day of bars, bad sandwiches, and one extended stop in a diner where Andre joined him for 40 minutes in a back booth. Couldn't hear much over the jukebox, Sol said, but they were friendly. Not first-time friendly. Comfortable. Any handshakes with envelopes? None I could see, Sol said. But Andre left with a grin and Luca left with a check folded in his wallet. That sealed more than one suspicion. I told Wolfe. He grunted, which in his language is the punctuation for a point scored. At 6:30 the next evening, Wolfe's office was as ready as it ever is for a guest he expects to dissect. Chairs placed with military precision, coffee service, waiting, lighting adjusted to a flattering but unforgiving balance. Fritz had been told only that we were expecting a man with pastries. His expression suggested this was not a sentence he thought he'd ever hear. At exactly 7, the bell rang. I opened the door to Andre wearing a jacket that tried hard to look expensive and carrying a flat box the size of a chessboard. The smell came through before the cardboard, almond, citrus, and that quiet lift of cardamom. Mr. Wolfe, I said as I led him in. This is Andre. Andre, Nero Wolfe. Wolfe inclined his head the way a mountain acknowledges the existence of a bird. Good evening. You've brought something? Andre set the box on the desk like an offering. 3 types, he said. Almond cardamom, pistachio lemon, and espresso hazelnut. No one's doing these together. Wolfe didn't touch them yet. And you baked them yourself? From scratch this morning, Andre said. I even toasted the nuts myself. Wolfe leaned back. Mr. Goodwin, a plate, if you please. I opened the box and plated 2 of each, placing them within Wolfe's easy reach. He picked up one of the almond cardamom pieces, snapped it, listened, and brought it to his nose. Then, with a delicacy that would have made a cat jealous, he took a bite. Andre watched him like a man waiting for a jury foreman to read the verdict. You toast the cardamom seeds before grinding, Wolfe said. That's right, Andre said, a flicker of pride showing, and you cut the sugar slightly to let the spice present itself. Admirable restraint. Wolfe set it down. Why were you dismissed from Vaccaro's? Andre blinked. Who says I was? Your hand, Wolfe said. And your cardamom. Vaccaro disapproves of it in almond batches. You persisted. You persisted because you mistake persistence for inevitability. In baking, as in life, they are not the same. I watched Andre's face shift from pleased to wary. Look, I didn't come here to... You came here, Wolfe said evenly, because you are in the employ of a man named Luca Bianchi, who fancies himself an instrument of vengeance. You came here because he persuaded you to use your skill to disrupt Miss Lupo's business, to discredit her staff, and to amuse yourselves with small vandalism. The salted threshold was yours. The imitation Biscotti in the rain was yours. The camera cable, yours or his? Andre's mouth opened and closed. You can't prove? I can, Wolfe said. You used coarse sea salt, the same you use for your pretzel experiments, which you spoke of to a cafe owner on your route. You used Vaccaro's bags because you had a leftover bundle from your time there. You cut the camera cable with the same pliers you carry for wire shelving repairs, one of which bears your fingerprint and was found by Mr. Goodwin after your so-called delivery shortage. And you baked with cardamom because you cannot resist marking your work. In art, that is signature. In sabotage, it is confession. The room went very quiet except for the soft hiss of the radiator. Andre's eyes darted to me, looking for a crack, and found none. What's the play here? He said finally. The play, Wolfe said, is that you will deliver, in writing, a statement of your actions and your employer's instructions. You will do so to Mr. Goodwin tomorrow morning. In return, Ms. Lupo will refrain from prosecuting you for commercial sabotage, and I will refrain from seeing you reduced to delivering donuts to gas stations. Andre tried to sneer, but the structure wasn't there. And if I don't? Then, Wolfe said, you will leave here without your box, without your reputation, and with a visit from the police before you finish your next route. I let the silence after that stretch. Andre looked at the box, at Wolfe, then at me. I'll write it, he muttered. Good, Wolfe said, already turning his attention to the pistachio lemon piece. Mr. Goodwin will see you out. On the stoop, Andre paused. You're good, he said. I'm better when I like the person, I said, and shut the door. When I came back, Wolfe was chewing thoughtfully. The espresso hazelnut is competent, he said, but he over-roasts the nuts. Are we giving Teresa the letter before or after we deal with Luca? I asked. After, Wolfe said. The cousin will be less inclined to bluster when his cat's paw has declawed himself. Mr. Panzer will bring him in tomorrow. You will be present. I will require the pleasure of his company here. I poured myself a drink and sat. The game had shifted. The hand behind the soggy biscotti was in view, but the reason for the theater still had to be pinned. And if I knew Wolfe, the pinning would happen here, in the office, with Luca squirming in the client chair and Wolfe leaning back, all appetite and certainty. Andre's statement arrived at 9 sharp, hand-delivered in a manila envelope like contrition on cheap stationery. He kept his eyes low and his mouth tighter than yesterday, which told me he'd slept on fear and found it filling. I took him to the hall table to sign and date, then walked him to the door. Ink is insurance, I told him. Yours just bought you a future with fewer handcuffs. He swallowed. Luca said this was just pressure, business stuff. Pressure is a thing you apply to dough, I said. On people, it's a crime. Go to work and don't improvise. When I put the document on Wolfe's desk, he didn't touch it at first. He breathed near it, the way he does with rare orchids and bad ideas. Then he nodded. Read. It was plain and ugly. Lips into teeth. Andre admitted to planting the salted threshold, to cutting the camera feed with a pair of pliers he kept in his root bag, to baking the imitation Biscotti, twice, the first ruined by too much anise, the second by rain on purpose. He wrote that Luca Bianchi had approached him with a way to make a little extra by helping teach a cousin a lesson for refusing to repay a loan and cheating good people. He wrote that Luca paid him $200 a hit in cash and promised there was more where that came from if the bakery looked shaky. And at the bottom was a line that made Wolfe's eyelids twitch. I was told the goal was to push her into selling the business or taking a partner who could manage things properly. Partner, Wolfe said, an ambiguous word with an odor. Denton, I said. He likes the word manage. He likes the word margin, Wolfe said, but he might rent partner if it helped him posture. Call Mr. Panzer. Saul had already checked in. He'd collected Luca as requested. Not a formal arrest, Just an invitation with hands and a tone that suggested refusal was exercise he didn't need. They were inbound. Meanwhile, I rang Denton and told him, in the bored cadence of a man moving numbers, that we were resolving Ms. Lupo's supplier situation today at 5 at our office and would appreciate his presence to straighten the paperwork. He laughed exactly once, promised a flourish, and asked who else would be there. I said lightly, a party, and named no names. I fetched Teresa and Milo next, with a text to Rosa to close early and lock the back. Teresa's reply came back fast, "We'll be there," followed by a second, quieter, "Thank you." Milo didn't use punctuation. His okay tasted like iron. Wolfe had me call the co-op to confirm Andre's employment. Dispatch confirmed his route, his start date 3 weeks ago, and a couple of performance notes for unusual delays at one client, which made me consider inventing an award for euphemism. Then I called Carbone Service to request a written statement about yesterday's camera repair and the cut. Anthony, who had a soul like a clean wrench, emailed a paragraph that would make a judge purr. At 11, Saul pushed Luca into the office with the gentle courtesy Saul reserves for people who mistake swagger for posture. Luca tried for a grin and got as far as one corner. "Welcome," Wolfe said, sounding like he was greeting a fungus on a prized leaf. "Sit." Luca sat, and the chair made the small groan it uses when it senses a story it won't like. I put Andre's statement on a clipboard and set it where Luca could see the bottom third of a page, just enough to notice his name in Andre's handwriting. He looked at the letters as if they were creeping toward him. "That's a lie," he said, which is what men say when their name is spelled correctly. "Mr. Bianchi," Wolfe said, "you have announced yourself as a man with friends who know things. Tell me what they know." "They know Teresa owes me," he said, "and that she's running that place into the ground. I'm doing her a favor, scaring her straight." "Ah," Wolfe said. "The philanthropist. Mr. Goodwin." I handed Luca a photocopy of the fake inspection notice. He took it like it might bite. "We will have this traced to the printer that produced it," I said mildly. "Shops can be jury-rigged, but fonts have families. If we do that, will we find your cousinship with stupidity is legal or merely affectionate?" He tossed the paper back at me, missed, and watched it slide off the desk. "You can't prove—" "Mr. Bianchi," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin is not the police. He has better manners, but I am the man whose house you have trespassed upon with pastry. For that alone, you owe me a recital. You were paid by whom?" "Nobody," he said, which is never true. We let the room breathe. You can soundproof walls, you can't soundproof a man's head. He looked at Saul, then at me, and finally at Wolfe, who has a way of making lying feel like scratching a record in front of the composer. "Look," Luca said, slumping into the confession posture men think is casual. "A friend of mine said there was a guy who wanted in. He said Teresa needed a partner to steady the ship. The guy told me if I made a little noise, she'd be more amenable, and I'd get a finder's fee when it happened." "A friend," Wolfe said. "Name?" "Bobby," he said immediately, which meant it either was or it wasn't. "Bobby K." "K for Kornfeld," he said, then blinked like he'd caught himself and swallowed the rest of the alphabet. He knows people in commercial rentals." There it was, the word I'd been waiting to hear without knowing it. Rentals. I saw Wolfe's attention sharpen without moving. He said nothing for a count of 3, which felt like standing next to a lake that had just frozen. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "call Ms. Lupo. Ask her for the name of her landlord." Teresa answered on the first ring. "Rinaldi Holdings," she said. "But I deal with their agent. A man named Kornfeld," I thanked her, told her we were on schedule for 5, and hung up. "Mr. Bianchi," Wolfe said, now eyeing Luca as if he were a species of beetle new to science and unwelcome to catalogues. "You're Mr. Kornfeld, is a ghoul. If he is unwise, he is also presumptuous. He believes that value can be lowered with noise the way dough can be punched down. In this he is, alas, not entirely mistaken. Luca spread his hands. I didn't break anything. You just conspired, Wolfe said. Do not romanticize your work. Thank Mr. Panzer for escorting you here, instead of the place where men share toilets. He glanced at Saul. Keep him until 5. He will attend our little gathering. If he bolts, step on his shadow. Saul said he would and assumed a position near the door that looked casual and meant mathematics. Wolfe had me place calls for the afternoon seating. Ms. Lupo and Mr. Milo, yes. Mr. Denton from Halberd, yes. Mr. Kornfeld from Rinaldi Holdings, to discuss tenant reputation, yes. I gave him a time and left the hook baited. Mr. Carbone, no need. His statement would do. Mr. Andre, no. His part was played. I set chairs in their trapezoid, Wolfe's geometry for watching angles collide, and checked the bell. The brownstone's way of anticipating guests is to smell a bit greener, and the office took on that crisp, drier quality it gets when Wolfe plans to peel a room like an onion. At 4:30, Teresa and Milo arrived together, storm-muted, but steady. I tucked them in the front room and briefed them. Do not interrupt. Answer Wolfe's questions directly. Do not make eye contact with those you'd rather hit. Teresa nodded. Milo looked at his hands and flexed the fingers as if reminding them they did better work on dough. At 5, the first chime was Denton. He came in like a Roma before a kitchen, loud but practiced. I parked him 2 chairs down from Wolfe, within conversational range and moral discomfort. He wore a smile you could iron a shirt on. Always a pleasure, he said. I brought itemizations. Paper is so retro. Paper, Wolfe said, has a longer memory than you. The second chime was Kornfeld. Tall tan raincoat over a suit 2 shades richer than its owner, hair with product, a face that had learned to be smooth around words that weren't. He smelled like a place that polished wood and told you what experience you were having while you had it. Mr. Wolfe, he said as if that were a password. Bobby Kornfeld, Rinaldi Holdings. I represent the landlord of Lupo's property. I'm sorry to intrude. You are not, Wolfe said. You are delighted. Please sit. Luca was installed last, ushered by Saul with the elegance of a man parking a car that might roll. He took the chair near the lamp, too far to kick anyone he wanted to kick, and stared at his shoes. Wolfe let the silence settle into the corners. He has a gift for making air heavy when he wants men to feel the weight of it. Then he opened his eyes fully and arranged his voice the way a surgeon arranges instruments. We are disturbed, he said, so we will impose order. He flicked a finger at me. I handed him Andre's statement. He held it up without letting it leave his hands. We have here a signed account from a delivery driver, Mr. Andre Vitale, who was admitted to several acts of minor sabotage against Ms. Lupo's bakery. The salted threshold, the cut camera cord, a series of anonymous complaints to the Department of Health, whose phrasing will, if required, be traced to the device that authored them. He names as his instigator Mr. Luca Bianchi, present, who acted with the promise of a fee should Miss Lupo take on a partner. Teresa inhaled as if she'd been underwater. Milo did not move. Wolfe's gaze climbed to Denton. Mr. Denton, you have resented Miss Lupo's departure from your service. Did you engage Mr. Bianchi? Denton's smile did a neat trick. I'll grant him that. It cracked without breaking. Absolutely not. We sell flour, not fear. I thought you sold margins, I said. He granted me a glance he must practice in his bathroom mirror. We sell relationships. Wolfe said, which meant he'd already filed Denton under flavoring, not meal. Then Wolfe's eyes went to Kornfeld. Mr. Kornfeld, your firm has explored the possibility of replacing Ms. Lupo with a different tenant. Perhaps a brand with more capital and less soul. You have discovered that goodwill costs money, or if you wish to purchase the same space cheaper, that goodwill can be, shall we say, discounted. Kornfeld crossed his legs and let the tan raincoat fall open, revealing confidence. Mr. Wolfe, Rinaldi Holdings does not interfere with our tenants' operations. We assess performance, we offer renewals or not, we whisper, Wolfe said. You uttered to Mr. Bianchi the word partner. You suggested to him that if Ms. Lupo were more receptive, an investor could be found, perhaps one your client preferred. You did not tell him to commit crimes. You told him to make noise. He hired noise. Kornfeld's smile was perfect until it became human. You have no proof of any such conversation. Proof, Wolfe said softly, is a ladder. Sometimes one does not need to climb if the view is plain. He lowered his eyes to the statement again. But do not console yourself overmuch. Mr. Vitale has agreed to record a conversation under Mr. Panza's supervision if I deem it necessary. You will not perform well on tape. You could feel the room change temperature by degrees. Denton didn't look surprised. He looked relieved, which was a kind of confession of its own. Luca stared at Kornfeld the way a dog stares at a car that has backed over its own bumper. Teresa's hands were in her lap, gripping themselves like a lifeline. Milo had leaned forward a hair, enough to suggest a man who wants to know if timing can be needed. Wolfe exhaled. Now, we will get to the dessert later. First, the debt. Mr. Bianchi, you will sign a repudiation of any claim of debt against Ms. Lupo. You will also return the finder's fee you received last week. I didn't, Luca began. Saul shifted his foot on the carpet. Luca stopped. Mr. Denton, Wolfe said, you will send a corrected, itemized invoice to Ms. Lupo by tomorrow at noon, reflecting only the goods delivered and not any fantasy. You will also cease communicating with her staff about ingredients. Speak to owners, not ovens. Denton had the decency to look like a man caught with a hand in a bowl of pistachios. He nodded. And Mr. Kornfeld, Wolfe said, voice going softer, which for him is a blade, you will leave this house understanding that if you continue to manipulate the reputation of a tenant under the pretext of stewardship, you will find yourself a topic at the Department of Buildings, the Attorney General's office, and across every counter that serves espresso to lawyers. Miss Lupo will not take a partner you have selected. If she takes a partner, it will be bread, not a man. Milo actually smiled at that, quick and involuntary, like yeast catching. Kornfeld uncrossed his legs. You can't threaten. I can, Wolfe said. I am, and I will make good on it, but I prefer not to. This is your cue to apologize to Miss Lupo for your concern and to withdraw. Kornfeld turned toward Teresa, his mouth tried on humility like a suit it hadn't tailored. Ms. Lupo, he said, if anything I said was misconstrued. It wasn't, she said, steady. But I hear you. Wolfe closed his eyes, which meant the first course was done. We will reconvene briefly after coffee, he said. Mr. Goodwin, chairs will remain. Mr. Panza, keep Mr. Bianchi from exercise. Ms. Lupo, you and your baker will remain within call. Mr. Denton, do not evaporate. Mr. Kornfeld, delight us by remaining. The room stood because the room always stands when Wolfe dismisses it. We move to the hall, where the mirror tells the truth too brightly, and men consider it a neutral observer. Fritz brought coffee in small plates. I placed them like offerings in a ceremony I've learned by muscle memory. In the office, Wolfe drank water and arranged the words he would use next. When he opened his eyes again, they were calm, and the brownstone felt, in that particular way it does, like a courtroom that serves Biscotti instead of bail. When we brought everyone back into the office, the air felt heavier than before. The kind of weight that tells you the talking is almost over and the deciding is about to begin. Wolfe hadn't moved so much as a fingertip. He had the clipboard with Andre's statement in front of him, the paper perfectly squared to the edge of his desk and the room's geometry, His geometry made sure every eye landed on it at least once. "I have no wish to linger," Wolfe began, his voice pitched low, like a man giving the verdict to himself first. "The facts are sufficient, the conduct is clear, and the remedies, while imperfect, will serve." He turned his head to Luca. "You conspired for profit under the pretext of grievance. It will not yield you the profit, and it has already cost you the grievance. The debt you claim is dissolved. Here and now, you will sign the repudiation Mr. Goodwin will place before you." I handed Luca a single sheet that said in plain words he waived any and all claims of debt, past or future, against Teresa Lupo. He read it twice, the second time slower, as if the ink might have changed, then signed with the reluctance of a man writing his own name on a bad check. "Mr. Panzer will keep that until we are finished," Wolfe said, and Saul collected it like it was exactly what he came for. Then Wolfe shifted his eyes to Denton. "You have conducted your business with an indulgence for manipulation. That indulgence is ended. The corrected invoice will arrive tomorrow, noon. Any further attempt to influence Ms. Lupo's suppliers or staff will be taken as malice and treated accordingly. If you wish to compete, do so with competence, not contamination." Denton's grin was thin but present, the grin of a man who sees no profit in public refusal. "You'll have the invoice," he said. Finally, Wolfe looked at Kornfeld. "Your intent was the acquisition of an asset at a discount. You dressed it in the language of partnership and concern. You engaged an intermediary with neither judgment nor subtlety. You believed, mistakenly, that a small business could be softened with noise. What you neglected is that noise, once made, does not stop where you wish it to. It travels. You are fortunate it traveled here first." Kornfeld's posture stayed upright, but his eyes had stopped moving around the room. He was fixed on Wolfe in the way men fix on a precipice. "I hear you," he said with a controlled smoothness. "You do," Wolfe replied, "and you will remember it. You will convey to your client that Miss Lupo remains in possession of her bakery, her lease, and her resolve, and that further attempts at dislodgement will be met with both publicity and prosecution." Kornfeld inclined his head in what might have been agreement or calculation. "Understood." Teresa sat straighter at that, not smiling but letting the air back into her lungs. Milo didn't look away from Kornfeld until Wolfe did. "That is the substance," Wolfe said, closing the matter in his tone. "The rest is commentary. I have none. Mr. Goodwin will walk you out." They filed out in the order of their guilt, Luca first, Denton next, Kornfeld last, each carrying their own private weight. Saul shadowed them until the front door closed. Teresa and Milo stayed behind. Wolfe regarded them for a long moment before speaking again. "You have your business. It is whole. Keep it that way. The enemy was not skillful, but persistence can replace skill if vigilance lapses. Examine your security, physical, procedural, and personal. Trust, but tether it." Teresa nodded once, slowly. "I will, and thank you. Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "will send you the documentation for your records. The originals will remain here. I will not waive my fee, but you may add at your discretion, the value of aggravation avoided." Milo stood then, his chair sliding back with a careful scrape. "We'll pay it," he said, "and we'll keep an eye on the ovens." When they were gone, the room felt larger. Fritz came in to clear the untouched coffee cups from the side table and paused just long enough to glance at the Biscotti plate. "The pistachio lemon was the least offensive," he said, then left without waiting for Wolfe's opinion. I leaned back in my chair. So that's it. Kornfeld crawls back to his client. Denton writes an honest invoice for the first time in his career. Luca goes back to whatever rock he was under, and Andre sticks to delivering flour and keeps his cardamom to himself. "That is it," Wolfe said, though in his voice it meant, "until it isn't." He closed his eyes. "It is a reminder that appetite is not limited to the kitchen. Men like Kornfeld feed on opportunity, men like Denton on leverage, and men like Bianchi on scraps. Miss Lupo's fault, if she had one, was in assuming the noise outside her ovens was unrelated to the bread within. And ours? I asked. Our fault, he said, would have been ignoring the biscotti. I didn't argue. You don't, not when the man's whole theory had started with a rain-spoiled pastry. Outside, the street had the washed look of a city between storms. I stood, gathered the last of the papers, and dropped Andre's statement into the locked drawer Wolfe uses for things he might need again. Wolfe reached for the final almond cardamom piece and examined it one more time before setting it down untouched. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "dinner will be in 20 minutes. Fennel, orange, and something roasted to remind us that not all heat is malicious." "Right," I said, and headed for the hall. The case had closed the way Wolfe likes, without courtrooms, without running, without him leaving his chair. Outside of the brownstone, people would keep scheming about partnerships and percentages. Inside, the air was still again, and the only noise was the faint clink of Fritz in the kitchen, setting the table for a meal that, for once, nobody had tried to ruin. The brownstone does a particular kind of quiet the morning after a case pivots, like a restaurant, before doors open, knives sharp, linens crisp, the room remembering what it's for. Wolfe let me have the desk while he attended to orchids, which is his way of working where chlorophyll can't argue back. I sent scans, Andre's signed recital to Ms. Lupo's Council of Record, a cousin's friend who'd suddenly become very brisk, Anthony Carbone's statement to the department liaison, and a cover note distilling the mess into nouns and verbs for anyone whose coffee needed help. Kaminsky called to say she'd annotate Lupo's file with verified harassment and no violations pending, which is the municipal equivalent of a gold star. By 10, Saul had returned Luca to the sunny side of free men with a caution that translated across every borough and 2 languages. He reported Kornfeld had spent part of last night on the phone in his car outside the brownstone, talking too fast to a client about optics. Saul didn't catch a name, but the tone was someone discovering the difference between noise and echo. I took the retainer balance from the front room safe and set it on Wolfe's blotter. He didn't glance up, which is how he indicates a number is neither insult nor joy, merely arithmetic settling into place. "When Ms. Lupo arrives," he said, "we will be brief." Before that, I wanted to see how the damage looked without shoes on, so I zipped downtown. Lupo's had the shutters up and the front camera blinking red in a way that made the day friendlier. Inside, the morning rush was small but sincere. 2 regulars were doing that thing New Yorkers do after danger, buying more than they needed and trying to pretend they weren't making a gesture. Rosa had a line that wasn't supposed to be a smile but didn't fight hard enough. Milo came out from the back with a tray that smelled like he dared the day to argue with him. When he saw me, he jerked his chin toward the kitchen. "We found your ghost," he said. In the prep area, the spice shelf had been reorganized by someone who believed in a different alphabet. Cardamom had wandered forward from the back row like a bold cousin. Anise had drifted right. A small deli cup, twin to the one I'd filled with salt, sat tucked behind the bulk canister of almonds. It held 3 green pods and a folded scrap of craft paper. On the paper, neat block letters. "Use more." "Yesterday?" I asked. "Early," Rosa said. "Before I came in. I missed it. This morning I saw the cup when I grabbed almonds." "You didn't touch the note," I said. "I'm not stupid," she said, offended. "Who was here between 4 and 5? I asked. "Milo," Teresa said from the doorway. "And the co-op guy at 517. She didn't have to say his name. You could smell it. Cardamom, habit, nerve. I bagged the cup and the scrap for Wolfe's drawer of things men later pretend didn't exist. "This isn't for the police," I said. "It's for certainty. If he goes soft later, we will remind him who he is." Teresa nodded. Not just at me. At the room, at the way it had held, at the fact that sometimes the thing that tries to ruin you leaves a calling card you can pin to a board. She had shadows under her eyes, and the posture you get when your livelihood has been on a rack and not broken. "You got the department to fix our online record," she said. "Kaminsky did," I said. "I just pushed and told the truth in shorter sentences than usual." "Thank you," she said. "We'll take care of the rest." On my way out, I paused. "One thing," I said. "Wolfe won't say it because he isn't a romantic and he hates meddling. So I'll say it because I'm occasionally both. If you want to make your house harder to shake, give the man who guards your ovens a reason to tie his future to your door." Milo's eyes flicked up. Teresa looked at him and then at me. "You're saying—" "I'm saying men like Kornfeld shop for fishers the way some people shop for fruit. If you want to make their fingers come away empty, you can do that with a piece of paper and a percentage." I lifted a shoulder. "Or don't. Just bake it into your thinking." Milo didn't move for a beat. Then he said, very dry, "We'll proof the idea." Back uptown, the office was arranged for a short finale. No crowd this time, just gravity. At noon, Teresa sat where she had the first day, and Milo took the wing chair again, but this time like it had remembered his shape. Wolfe let me summarize. Andre's morning souvenir on their spice shelf. Kaminsky's update, Denton's corrected invoice in my inbox with numbers that had learned chastity overnight, Kornfeld's absence of further cleverness. "You will find," Wolfe said finally, "that the fewer conversations you have with men like Mr. Kornfeld, the better you will sleep. If a lease question arises, consult counsel who is not related to you and does not eat at your counter for free." Teresa almost smiled. "Understood. Now," he said, and rolled his eyes toward the plate I'd set within reach. "The pistachio lemon. Mr. Goodwin, break." I did. The snap sang, the crumb held. He tasted, held the bite on his tongue like a thought he might adopt, and then set the rest down. "He will be a tolerable baker when he is no longer trying to be an author," he said. "You will, if you're wise, ignore him forever." "We can do that," Milo said. Wolfe closed his eyes, not in dismissal, more like punctuation. "Then we are finished." He opened them again and added, "Because he is not a machine, do not overcorrect." Men who have been shaken become zealots for locks and cameras and suspicion. Those are tools, not diets. They left lighter. The office resettled. Fritz brought in lunch, and the house resumed its old course. We had salmon and a salad you could tessellate. The fennel had been told a story and listened. I took a call from Saul telling me he'd seen Kornfeld go into Rinaldi's building with a folder and come out with fewer illusions. Good. Illusions belong to other trades. At 3, Denton's itemized invoice pinged again, as if afraid of being ignored. It included a note that managed the feat of sounding apologetic without admitting anything, which is an art in his line and one I'm happy to see used sparingly. I filed it with the rest of the detritus in Wolfe's drawer of cured nonsense. Late afternoon slid in. Rain had washed out and left a sky so clean it almost looked western. I was at my desk, deciding to enjoy the quiet on purpose, when the phone buzzed. "Rosa," her voice had its usual snap with a layer of something else underneath. Relief, maybe, learning how to talk. "Mr. Goodwin?" 2 things. 1. News guy came by and asked Teresa if she wanted to comment on the harassment hoax. She told him no comment and gave him your number. "Wise," I said. "What's 2? "Someone left a small paper bag by the front camera," she said. "We didn't touch it. It's probably nothing." It wasn't nothing. It never is when someone calls it that. "Leave it. I'm coming." By the time I got there, the block had pulled itself together into afternoon. The bag was under the camera's eye like a kid sitting straight for class. I took a shot of it before I picked it up because habits save time. Inside, a single biscotti, plain almond, no cardamom, the top glazed just enough to shine. No note. The bag was stamped with Lupo's own mark. Milo watched me from the counter. "He left it 10 minutes ago," Rosa said. "Big guy, knit cap, no beard." "Andre's done shaving," I said. "Not him," she said. "Someone older, broad. Looked familiar. Couldn't place him." I brought the biscuit to the back, snapped it, tasted. I looked at Milo. He was already shaking his head. "Not mine," he said. "Not Teresa's recipe either. Closer to Paolo." I thought of the empty biscotti tin under Andre's arm on his route, of the way men borrow what they can't make. I called Paolo. He answered like he answers ovens, quick so they don't burn. "You missing a biscuit?" I asked and described it. "Almond, little glaze?" he said. "I gave one to a man just now. He said he was apologizing to a cousin." "Luca," I said. "Big shoulders, bad haircut," Paolo said. "Yeah." I left the biscuit with Teresa because not every symbol has to be a threat. Some can be a small piece of the world deciding to behave. On my way out, I met Luca on the sidewalk. He didn't try to swagger. He didn't try anything, which was improvement. "I signed," he said, like a man reporting from a war he'd just learned he wasn't in. "I saw," I said. "She's still my cousin," he said. "She was yesterday too," I said. "You just remembered it." He nodded once and went inside without looking for a camera. I walked back to the brownstone through a city that had put its chin up again. Wolfe was in the office, reading and not pretending it was anything else. I set Paolo's biscuit on the desk and told him what it was. He examined it like an artifact from a better empire. "Decent," he said after the bite. "His almonds are fresher this week. It's more apology than art, but apologies are most useful when recognizable." "Rosa says a reporter's sniffing around," I said. "He may sniff," Wolfe said. "He will find that those who hired his attention failed, and those who deserved obscurity received it." I sat, stretched, felt the day settle. The house made the quiet it makes when justice has been done in the only way it can be in our line, without trumpets, without ropes, with paper and words and a plate. I thought we were done until Wolfe reached without looking for the soggy imposter we'd kept as evidence. He held it a second, and then let it go. "Archie," he said, "there is an error I have not corrected." I waited. "Yesterday you suggested that men like Mr. Kornfeld prefer partners to bread," he said. "That is wrong. They prefer neither. They prefer yield." "Catchy," I said. "It is not a slogan," he said. "It is a species. One cannot educate it. One can only deny it, die it." He shut his eyes for a count of 2, then opened them with the faint, reluctant curve at the corner of his mouth he allows when a meal is promised. "Tell Fritz I will have beer." "After all that fennel?" I said. "Fennel atones," he said. "Beer forgives." The bell sounded. Then, one short ring, no urgency. I went to the door. A courier from Rinaldi stood with an envelope and a neutral face. Inside, a letter on thick paper acknowledging confusion caused by a third-party contractor, a renewal option for 5 years at a rate you could live with, and the kind of language lawyers write when they've been taught a lesson without a headline. I brought it back in and put it on Wolfe's desk. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. The room felt properly weighted again, the way it does when the furniture of the world has been moved back where it belongs. I sat and let the silence sit with me. In the kitchen, a pan clinked. On the plate, what was left of a biscotti cooled. Not soggy, not symbolic, just what it was supposed to be. The letter from Rinaldi could have been framed and hung in a museum under the title, "When a Landlord Learns Shame." I left it on Wolfe's desk because heavy paper adds weight to a room, and this one had the decency to sag its corner a little in apology. Fritz's beer arrived with the air of a benediction, which is what beer becomes around 8 on a day that started at a crime and ended at a contract. "Tell Ms. Lupo to have her counsel inspect the renewal," Wolfe said, after he'd read as far as the word option and no further. "If the clauses do not contain saw teeth, she may sign. If they do, she may decline and rely upon publicity, but only if she enjoys being quoted." "She doesn't," I said. "She bakes for a living. The closest she wants to fame is a line out the door she can still recognize." "Then she will sign," he said, and drank. "And she will not buy a camera system that sends her soul to the cloud. A second lock will suffice. Locks are honest. Clouds are theatrical." I called Teresa and told her the envelope had landed with the right tone and the right numbers. She didn't cheer and she didn't cry. She did the thing people do when the deck they've been bracing finally decides not to turn over. "Milo's here," she said. "If you don't mind, we'll come by with something for Fritz. We owe you. And him. Bring your own almonds," I said. "He will judge them." She laughed the laugh of a woman who could breathe through her nose again. The line clicked off light. Andre texted next. The message was plain: "I'm quitting the route. Going back to bake, somewhere that wants me." It didn't ask for advice or forgiveness or a letter of recommendation written in spice blends. It attached a photo of a bowl with eggs, flour, sugar, and a caption that made even me feel a little sorry for him. "Want to make, not break." I left it unanswered because men who finally used a door shouldn't be interrupted while they enjoy the other side. Denton's corrected invoice pinged again because some men think a bell rung twice proves sincerity. I filed it. I also filed his follow-up. "If Ms. Lupo needs almonds, we can..." and stopped reading there. I wrote back, "She'll be fine." When a man's business model is the long con, brevity is the only language he can't pretend not to speak. At 6, the doorbell announced a delegation. Teresa walked in, not carrying fear. Milo followed with a pan warm under a towel, steam pushing its case. Fritz met them like relatives who bring good news and better food. He lifted the towel with the discretion of a surgeon and nodded at what he found. "Crostata," Milo said. "Simple. Blood orange. We made too much zest." "There is no such thing," Fritz said, which is the most intimate sentence I've ever heard him say about another man's oven. We stowed it in the kitchen so its perfume could work at the borders of our good intentions. In the office, Teresa stood with a letter in both hands, scanned the line that mattered, and let her shoulders find the height nature intended. "I'll have it checked," she said. "But even if the lawyer slaps me for being hopeful, I like the feel of this paper." "You may," Wolfe said. "Paper has texture. It is not a screen. It lacks deceit's favorite lubricant." Milo didn't sit at first. He looked around like the room had grown a size since the last time he was in it. "I did the math," he said to Teresa, but he wasn't really looking at her. He was looking at that space between two people where decisions stand until you notice them. "The percentage you talked about. If we write it right, I can afford it, and if I can't, I'll bake until I can." Teresa didn't rush. She has the baker's habit of timing. Let the proofing do its job. Don't punch down because you're nervous. "I want you to have it," she said, "because you built it with me." He nodded once as if a muscle had unclenched. It wasn't dramatic. It was the sound a shop makes when one of its doors finds the frame again. "Very good," Wolfe said, saving us all from syrup. "You will, however, put it on paper. Sentiments spoil, agreements keep." Teresa looked at me, because I'm the one in this house who enjoys ushering ink into corners. "I'll send you a template," I said. 2 signatures, 1 notary, and you're a harder target." They didn't ask about Andre. People who survive sabotage don't need to tour the saboteur's remorse. They did ask about Luca, and Wolfe gave them exactly as much as they needed to sleep. He will be quiet. Fritz brought plates and knives and formalized our ceasefire with dessert. The crostata had that particular harmonic of bitter and bright that gets men through winters. Wolfe ate like he was apologizing to the world for the times he hadn't. When Fritz left the room to dice fennel into order, Teresa set her fork down. "I keep thinking about the first note," she said. "Best served soggy." Milo made a face that could have sharpened knives. He thought it was clever. "It was crude," Wolfe said. "The vulgar often mistake volume for emphasis. Soggy is an insult only if you worship snap. Most people worship warmth." "Chewy beats crunchy," I said. "In this," Wolfe sniffed, "you are a barbarian. But yes, the point, Miss Lupo, is that metaphor only wounds when it lands on an exposed nerve. You are not exposed, you have built casing. Keep it." She nodded, not as a vow, but like someone trying on a coat that finally fits. They left with their pan and their renewal and a list of steps that would look, to outsiders, like boring administration. Safety usually does. When the door closed, the brownstone went back to its preferred climate, which is serene with undertones of vanity. I had the urge to say something sentimental, so I wisely didn't. Wolfe spared me the effort by lifting the renewal letter again, glancing at the embossed logo and setting it down like a man signing a treaty he hadn't read because he already knew who'd lost. "Dinner," he said, "and then coffee. I want to taste blood orange under heat." We ate in the dining room where the light is patient and the chairs, which have seen more criminals than any courtroom, hold their tongues. Trout again, because when a man does a thing right, you should let him repeat it. The salad was so crisp I could hear my better self chewing. After, Fritz poured coffee and allowed himself, which he rarely does, a sentence that started with, "When I had my first kitchen," and ended with, "The landlord thought Greece was a moral failing." Wolfe grunted the grunted equivalent of, "Yes, civilization is one long argument with fools." When we were back in the office, I did the one errand left, a message to Kaminsky with the good news about the renewal and a thank you she would ignore and remember. I also sent a short line to Carbone that his statement had helped, and if he ever needed a favor that involved words instead of wires, he could ask. He would never cash it, and we would never forget. That's the kind of ledger I like. "What remains?" Wolfe asked. "Nothing that can't get by without us," I said. "Andre will burn a batch somewhere and learn. Denton will sell flour to people who deserve him. Kornfeld will discover there's more money in tenants who pay than in ships he thinks he can scuttle. Luca will tell a slightly different story in bars, that he once did business with a famous detective, which, depending on the beer, might be true." Wolfe closed his eyes and leaned back until the chair's protest registered as consent. "You're lax in your cynicism, but in this instance, tolerably so." The phone rang, and because the gods of narrative like their bows tied, it was Paolo. He didn't waste time. "I gave the kid another biscuit," he said. "He thanked me like he'd been starving. No cardamom. He'll be fine." "He'll be himself," I said, which in baking is sometimes the same thing. "Tell Mr. Wolfe." "My almonds were fresher on purpose," Paolo added, and hung up before flattery could set. I passed on the message. Wolfe's mouth did that thing it does when he appreciates a boast that rides on truth. "We will buy a dozen on Saturday," he said. "Civilization is trained with patronage." "Not beer," I said. "Beer is a sacrament," he said. "Patronage is politics." Out the window the city had put on its evening face. Lights like reasons, windows like compromises, sidewalks pretending they weren't wet this morning. The case had not been a murder, which is what the public likes because it explains why we stare. It had been closer and more ordinary, the kind of slow-acting poison that men with offices and business cards feel entitled to pour the kind that doesn't set off alarms until the balance sheet coughs. The cure was dull. Paper, statements, a chair placed at the right angle in a room where words outnumber bullets. People will never make a movie about it. Which is why it worked. I put the renewal in an envelope she wouldn't lose, wrote 2 lines on the front because handwriting still outscores email when it wants to be believed, and set it on the out tray that isn't actually a tray, just the corner of the desk where things go when they're about to become history. Wolfe watched me do it, and, because he's kinder than he lets on, let me finish the ritual in peace. "Archie," he said finally, and the tone told me we were stepping out of the case and into the part where he gets to be philosopher because he earned it. "There is a species of theft that never touches the till." "I've met it," I said. "It steals confidence," he said. "It steals mornings. It steals the presumption that when one turns a key, one's work will be where it was left. It cannot be prosecuted as elegantly as embezzlement, and so one must swat it as one swats flies. That is irritating and necessary. Today we swatted. Tomorrow the flies will breed." "Cheery," I said. "Accurate," he said, and lifted the last wedge of crostata. He regarded it, then split it with the same neat pressure he'd used on Andre's offering. "But there is compensation." "Crostata," I said. "Dinner," he said, and then, because he allows me my role in the act, he finished it properly. "And the knowledge that we kept a kitchen open." I let him have the last line, because it was clean and correct and carried that moral weight he pretends to disdain. The brownstone settled for the night. Somewhere downtown, a landlord put away a plan he shouldn't have made. A supplier added honesty to an invoice like a new spice. A cousin decided to be a cousin. A baker arranged his spices with the cardamom back where it belongs and locked the door with a hand that didn't shake. I turned out the office light. The street spoke in its rain-washed voice. The orchids upstairs drank silently. Fritz hummed, polishing something that needed it. Wolfe exhaled in that way that means the world, for one more evening, has come to heal. And if you want a moral, you can take Wolfe's. We swatted flies and saved dinner. If you want mine, it's simpler. Never ignore a pastry left in the rain. It might be the whole case, soggy and loud and telling you exactly who you're dealing with if you've got the mouth to taste it. The brownstone was holding its breath, which in this house means Wolfe was ready to finish and everyone else had better be. Teresa and Milo sat side by side, their shoulders squared the way peoples do when they've decided they're not leaving until the thing is over. Kornfeld was across from them, too polished for the room, trying to look unbothered. Luca leaned in the far chair, watching his own knees. Denton sat with that half-smile of a man hoping the last page doesn't have his name on it. Wolfe had before him the renewal letter from Rinaldi Holdings, Andre's written confession, the corrected invoice from Halberd, and the photograph of the cardamom-laced imposter Biscotti. You could see him, in that way of his, sorting the noise from the notes until the tune played clean. "I dislike redundancy," he began, "but clarity is a virtue. This was never about Biscotti, soggy or otherwise. It was about leverage." He touched the letter with a fingertip. Mr. Kornfeld's client wanted Ms. Lupo's space without paying the price of its goodwill. Noise was introduced to depreciate the value. Mr. Bianchi was engaged to be the noisemaker, Mr. Vitale, the artisan of petty sabotage. Kornfeld started to speak, but Wolfe's hand rose, palm out. "Number you will listen. The salted threshold, the fake inspection notice, the cut camera feed, these were designed to sow distrust between Miss Lupo and her staff and to signal to passers-by that the shop was troubled. It was meant to make her either sell or accept a partner your client approved. Unfortunately for you, Mr. Kornfeld, you chose instruments incapable of resisting self-expression. Mr. Vitale left his cardamom signature. Mr. Bianchi left his own name in another man's hand. Wolfe's eyes moved to Denton. You, sir, were not architect but opportunist, whispering about shortages, suggesting that Miss Lupo's staff had divided loyalties. Harmless, perhaps. But in the wrong season, even a whisper curdles the cream. Denton's smile faded, replaced by the stillness of a man who knows a line has been drawn, and he's not on the right side of it. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said, retrieved from the bakery's spice shelf a cup containing cardamom pods and a note reading, "Use more," left after we confronted Mr. Vitale. That was not courage, it was vanity. And vanity, gentlemen, is what breaks schemes. Mr. Vitale's own confession names Mr. Bianchi as the one who passed him instructions, paid for by someone who spoke of partnership and management. That someone was you. Mr. Kornfeld sat perfectly still, but I caught the flicker at his jaw. Now, Wolfe went on, the remedy. Ms. Lupo retains her lease, unmolested, for 5 years. Mr. Bianchi has renounced any claim of debt. Mr. Denton has issued a corrected invoice and will confine his salesmanship to his own customers. Mr. Kornfeld will inform his client that the property is not available and that any further interference will be met with exposure. He let the word sit. Mr. Vitale has left his delivery route. The bakery will resume its business, and we will all eat something worthy of the name. He leaned back, signaling the work was done. That is all. The silence broke when Teresa said simply, "Thank you." It wasn't big, and it wasn't for show. Milo nodded once beside her, the kind of nod bakers give when they've taken bread from an oven, and it's exactly right. I showed them out. Denton left without a word. Luca gave me a half-hearted shrug and followed. Kornfeld paused just long enough to meet my eye and say, "You play hard." "No," I said. "Wolfe plays hard. I just keep score." When I came back, Wolfe was already reaching for the last slice of crostata Fritz had set aside. "Archie," he said, "this was not our most arduous case." "No," I said, "but it kept a kitchen open." He gave one of his rare small smiles. And that, my dear fellow, is worth far more than closing one. The brownstone settled again, the quiet of a place that's done its job. Outside, the city went on being itself, full of people who thought a soggy biscuit was just ruined pastry. We knew better,